Hey, what's up, everybody? Time for another game theory rambly video. If you like the videos, like, sub, comment, share, support the channel, super chat, super like, PayPal, Patreon. Support the channel in the same way. I can't believe we got the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 community trying to cancel me as well. Motherfucker, Nito forgot to delete his old messages on my fucking shit. Fuck me, dude. Fuck me. Jesus Christ. Actually, don't fuck me. He might be tsundere for me. It was a joke, but don't actually want you near my butthole. Thank you. So today I want to talk about what is optimal in games, right? And maybe it's impossible to be optimal, right? It might be impossible to be optimal because ultimately fighting games are a two-player game and we can not control our opponent, right? We can make, try to make more accurate guesses or judgments in the match, but because we cannot control the other person, maybe it's impossible to be optimal, right? Because it's a fighting game is inherently a two-player game, right? Which is why, I think people get so salty about games because you can't control what the other person is doing, right? It's a fighting game. It's inherently competitive. And besides that, thinking about being optimal, there are games where what might be optimal might be sort of in question, right? And I've said before, for a game like Dragon Ball Fighter Z, what is optimal is not as questionable, right? Because a lot of stuff it's just how much damage does it do? Does it build meter? And is it like a hard knockdown, right? There's like not as many variables in a game like Dragon Ball Fighter Z Fighters. But if you think about a game like Guilty Gear, right? When you're talking about optimal stuff, well, there's so many different mix-ups, you know what I mean? There's so many different character-specific things, and a lot of times the damage is so minuscule. You have different how much guard meter they have at the exact time. Maybe, say if you're Kai, maybe you want to do a corner knockdown. Maybe you want to hit the guy just a little bit out, mid-screen knockdown. Like there's a lot of variables in a game like Guilty Gear compared to other games, what might be optimal. Now, of course, you can try to do something that is, quotation marks, more optimal or the more optimal version of the idea that you're going for. Like that kind of thing is possible. But is it possible to be truly optimal in a game, to be truly perfect? Well, assuming that you are playing the game, I think, at the highest theoretical level, you would also assume that your opponent is also playing optimally, right? And again, that's where when we get into the idea that, well, then there's the guessing game. I can't control what you do. We can only just try to do the optimal thing for the situation that happens. We can try to make more accurate guesses, all that kind of stuff. But something that I always think is weird about the community is, and this goes into why people are retarded. When they don't want to like admit execution matters and all this kind of stuff. Because execution, I think, is one of the few things that your opponent does not control. Now, of course, well, I guess you could be scared. You could get, you could say some people, they can do combos in training mode, let's say, but when they get in a real match, they get nervous, that's possible, let's say. But, for sake of argument, doing a optimal combo is not affected by the other person. The other person doesn't affect you, right? The execution is on you, right? You can't use the opponent as a scapegoat, right? Well, you could, I guess. You might be like, oh, well, he's playing a character that I have to do a specific combo on. I have to change the combo time. But that's still technically on you, right? And that's why when I wrote in some of the comments when I was thinking about a game, say like Marvel 2. I don't play Marvel 2, not good at it at all. And I used that Viscount example, and I think he said it right. If he wasn't the person that said this, that's my bad. It's not against him, But I remember that there were, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 threads and, people talking about the game being played optimally and what the game looks like down the road, because you sort of had an idea like at its peak, this is what you could do. just like a character like Dalsum, I recall, Dalsum was sort of a theoretical character. Like Dalsum theoretically might be one of the best characters in the game or something like that. But, the execution to play him at that level optimally is just, it wasn't as reasonable. But theoretically, he could do that. But the Hayato example I was given is back in the day when you had, top players and Galaxy brains discussing the game was many people were talking about Hayato. Hayato is one of the worst characters in the game, if not maybe theoretically the worst character in the game, because all he has is that big corner combo. And you got to remember, like back in the day, the big plasma field to Hayato comp to Black Hayato, that was known like lickety split. Like that was a combo that like every player wanted to hit just once in a corner because it did a lot of damage and it's like, that was cool. That's a big combo, right? And it looked, snazzy, right? But even back in the day, people didn't know about double Black Hayato that you could actually instantly kill from it, technically, right? So there's this idea that, when it comes down to it, Hayato actually might be the legitimate worst character in the game because his neutral is so bad and he can't even chip you. He's got this one, okay, I guess, if you got the guy in the corner. And so what I was getting at when I made that recent Hayato videos, or these recent, I was saying, I wonder what it would be like if people knew about the stuff that I was doing, now and I guess more like 10 years ago and all this kind of stuff, long after the game has kind of been dead. I guess there's some people that still, you got a niche group of players, Marvel 2 forever, blah, 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 right? But it would be interesting if there would have been this known knowledge that theoretically, optimally, Hayato instantly kills you, like basically any character in the game, anywhere on the screen off a little attack, right? And I think that would be interesting to think about that in theory, because again, that's something on you, right? And you're like, oh, well, this is, it's difficult to do. And even, to make the double Black Hayato real, it is executionally demanding, right? Rollable, it's just hard. If you have rolling, or if you have rolling off, it's still a tight combo, but it's more reasonable, right? But if you have like rolling on, it's actually, whoa, it's like combo video type timing, right? But again, it would have been interesting to think of like, would people's theories on the game of what is optimal, what is the, theoretical optimal level of the game? What would it look like? Maybe Hayato would not have been a low tier character, right? So, just thinking about this kind of stuff and, people are like, oh, is this optimal? Do you think you can do this in the match? And I feel like it's really a buzzword, especially whenever I would watch matches of Dragon Ball FighterZ, Fighter Z, whatever. Everyone was always saying like, oh, that's optimal. That's optimal, optimal. And it's like, there's no question of if this is optimal or not. So you're just using this as a buzzword because so often, you can probably throw out a random number, maybe 99% of the time, right? If you think about it, right? It's like, you're not doing the optimal thing. And it's not even a question, right? That's not optimal. It's just a buzzword to make the audience the naive, not the naive, either the naive audience or the audience that is rent free, let's say, that doesn't want to admit the stuff that I was doing was optimal, whatever. We got to say like, oh, look, here's our players. They're doing so good. They're doing optimal. It's just like, it's like lying. It's weird to me, right? Like Ryu here, or I guess Daimo made me with Pikachu, I guess. You got to strive to be better, right? You got to strive for the next challenge. You can always, maybe in a sense, play the game more optimally. I don't think there's any game ever, fighting game ever, where you could say a person played optimally, right? Well, I'm sure you could have matches, that match, he always did the optimal thing to the situation, right? But in terms of, time and time again, always guessing the opponent, there's no player that always perfects everybody. Every single match they play is always a perfect, right? It just doesn't exist. So I think from that sense, no one will ever play fighting games optimally because it's impossible, because you can't control the opponent. It's not like a TAS or like they do actually make TAS and speedrun stuff of fighting games, actually, don't they? So I guess, could do something like that, but manipulating the computer, right? And I guess you could say maybe from a certain standpoint, you do manipulate your opponent with certain setups and you're guessing whatever. But just got asked about optimal stuff again, and it just goes back to show: can you ever play the game optimally? No. Can you play it more optimally though? Yes. And one of the only things you can do that is truly optimal, because you have control over it, is your execution in the game. And that just goes to show you why execution is so important. And the fact that you're taking away so much execution, it's like, well, if you take away execution, that's one of the only factors that can truly differentiate you between the opponent, because it's all on you. Now, of course, there's character matchup knowledge and all these other things, right? And that does exist, but execution, Remember, if you like the videos, like, subscribe, comment, share, support the channel if you want. Appreciate it. Thanks. The end.